It is now 2:06. Be the Audits and Government Efficiency Meeting. You like that, Paul? 2:06? It's Tuesday, October 23rd. I'm Councilmember Zine, the chair. Are we expecting Mr. Rosendahl, Mr. LeBon? Anybody know?
Have not been.
All right, well, we are 6 minutes behind, so trying to be efficient. We got 3 items on the agenda, 1, 2, and 3. And let's start with Gina Marie. What are you hearing? I know you got airport managed and planes coming in and going out.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, nice to see you.
What number are you at? What number are you on?
We're first.
You are?
We are first, and depending on your level...
Okay, then we'll do number 1. Mr. Clerk, number 1.
Item number 1, Controller Report.
Let me get you back before the traffic begins.
Controller Report relative to an audit of the city's emergency planning efforts and citywide disaster preparedness and follow-up of a prior audit conducted in 2008.
Okay, so the controller did an audit, city emergency planning efforts and citywide disaster preparedness and follow-up on a prior audit conducted in 08. So we want to determine the status of the 08 recommendations, assess the practices, update, all kinds of good things. This is definitely, the auditor, you must have spent a lot of time on this one. You got gray in the process, right?
That's right.
Okay, let's hear from the controller, and then we'll go over to Gina Marie.
Good afternoon. I'm Siri Kalsa from the Controller's Office, the Audit Division. As you mentioned, this 2012 audit is actually an update to a previously issued controller audit back in 2008. In 2008, we really focused on the city's centralized system for emergency planning and disaster preparedness. This audit looked at the current status of the recommendations from that previous audit, but expanded it to look at the emergency planning efforts in place at 5 critical city departments, one of which is LAWA, also the Port, Recreation and Parks, the Convention Center, and DOT.
Do we have representatives here from those departments? All of them? How was the parade? Wonderful. Okay. Nice meeting your mom. Okay.
This audit was done under contract with the firm Harvey Rose and Associates, and Steve Fody is the principal from that firm, and he'd be happy to give you an overview of the basic findings.
Steve, take it away.
Thank you, Siri. Councilman Zine, my name is Steve Fody, and I'm a principal with Harvey M. Rose Associates. Ms. Kalsa has given a good overview of the scope of the audit, and so I'm going to go through each of those individual areas that that she pointed to, so that you can understand what it was that we found during the audit. So the first one will be
all the departments that were...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So the first portion was to update the status of the recommendations that had been made in 2008 to find out where they were in terms of implementation. And without getting into all of the areas that we looked at, we were able to report back that about 61% of the recommendations had been implemented.
On all the departments?
Of all the departments. Okay. 29% had been partially implemented, and another 11% there had been either a disagreement with or they had not yet been implemented by the department. So out of the total of 56 recommendations, it was a very high level, about 90%, where the departments were working very actively to complete the objectives.
And those one is in dispute for some reason or other. Are those being worked out?
For the most part, yes. I think the ones that had not been implemented at the time were in process or had just been set aside for a while. So there's general agreement with the recommendations in that report.
Okay. And did you find the cooperation with the departments as you were doing the audit?
Yes,
yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So in that period of time, between 2008 and 2012, there were several key accomplishments I'll point out. One is that the Emergency Management Department had completed a strategic plan shortly after we did the audit, which was one of our recommendations, and that's currently being updated. They've provided improved processes and guidance for the departments in terms of preparing their emergency plans. There's been increased private sector involvement and collaboration with the city in terms of emergency planning and disaster preparedness. They have a formal agreement now with the American Red Cross, which we had found had been absent at the time we were in there in 2008, so that has been established. There's been enhanced community outreach, and of course, they completed and opened the state-of-the-art Emergency Operations Center.
Have you been there to visit that?
I have.
What do you think?
I've seen it under an exercise. It's a wonderful facility. Yeah.
Nice in an earthquake, too.
Yes.
Because you kind of bounced.
First place I'm going to head.
You went down in the basement.
Right.
Yeah.
So many areas that we found had not been implemented or were still in need of improvement were really integrated into the findings from the 2012 effort to go through and do the assessment of the 5 individual departments. So I'll go through those real briefly here. The report contains 7 principal findings with 54 recommendations. The highlights include that at the time we did the audit, the mayor and the city council had not yet implemented recommendations we made to strengthen EMD status in the city organization. We felt that the organizational placement of emergency preparedness functions at LAWA and POLA diminishes their effectiveness. They are placed low in the organization, and we felt that they needed to be risen to the executive management level of the organization.
Hold on a second. Mr. Rosendal's coming in.
Sorry about that.
It's all right, Bill.
Dramatic introduction here.
We're being joined by Councilman Rosendahl.
Nice to see you.
Thanks today.
Just seeing you, sir. Treat.
I'm the quiet one. Great.
You're quiet. Wait till he sits down and starts talking.
And eating.
You ready, Mr. Bill?
I'm ready.
Okay, we're on item number 1, and this is the Controller's Audit Emergency Basic Operations within the city different departments, and we're getting a review of the Controller's Audit, and we have representatives here from the various departments that were audited, and if you'll continue, please.
Okay, Councilman.
Thank you.
So as I was indicating, the first finding in the reports had pointed out that certain changes to the administrative code that we felt were necessary to elevate EMD in the city organization had not yet been implemented, and that we felt that the function within some of the key departments in the city needed to be elevated from where it was currently at, which is at a staff level in the organization.
It was too far low on the totem pole as far as getting something accomplished?
So for example, out at the Port of Los Angeles, the emergency preparedness function was placed in a division of the police department. So it was about 3 tiers from the executive management in that organization. So we had recommended that that be risen to the executive level so that they have more access and more authority within the organization and can focus on a broader mission than just pure public safety.
Right.
In another area, EMD in each of the 5 departments reviewed for the audit had not institutionalized mechanisms for communicating and coordinating with one another on emergency management directives, and instead relied heavily on interpersonal relationships. I can say that when we came in last time in 2008, Mr. Featherstone had just been hired, and I think through his good...
He was hired a long time ago. He just did a career.
Okay.
And now he elevated to a higher level.
At that time, he came into EMD, and he brought with it good offices with the departments and was able to really enhance the coordination and collaboration over those 4 years.
Is he here? Is Jim here? There he is.
But much of what we saw has been informal, and it has been really the character of the individuals that have been involved that have made it successful.
So it wasn't that we had a standard, it was the personalities versus the issue of the particular...
That was our observation.
Okay.
And so we had recommended that certain formal processes be established to strengthen those collaborations in the event that there's a change in personnel and individuals move on to other places. This was, I can point out that, for instance, with the airport, with LAWA, This was also an observation from their mayor's Blue Ribbon Task Force on Airport Security.
Now, that didn't prompt this audit, that whole issue with the blue ribbon, with all that. That was separate. This was a re-up from the 08.
Right.
Okay.
Some efforts that have been made to partner with the private sector and nonprofit community organizations have been encouraging since the 2008 audit was completed. However, EMD and 5 departments have not strategically collaborated with these organizations. So while we saw positive steps in that direction, there have been some processes established in order to have better communication and collaboration with the private sector. There was still some gaps in our mind. One of the biggest gaps that we found were at multiple departments where there's a heavy presence of contractors or nonprofit organizations. There hasn't been a real strategic effort to integrate them into the training and the planning and the other activities that are necessary to be prepared in the event of an emergency or a disaster. EMD does not assess or oversee department efforts to identify, prioritize, and mitigate facility and infrastructure hazards, diminishing the city's ability to strategically fund facility and infrastructure improvements that would improve emergency preparedness.
Do they have that authority?
They do not have that authority, although it is our understanding from the response from the mayor's office that that authority is being granted to them. So while they provide guidelines and kind of help the departments through this process, they don't evaluate the quality of the assessments or really prioritize them on a citywide basis, and we recommended that they in fact do that. The city's not developed a comprehensive plan for sheltering persons in the event of a major disaster or emergency incident. RAP staff have not been effectively trained on duties and responsibilities during a shelter activation, and many park facilities that would serve as shelter sites do not comply with American with Disability Act standards, or nor have they been assessed for seismic safety.
Kind of like what happened in New Orleans?
Well, I'm not going to characterize it like that, but there's certainly some need to improve, I think, the shelter capability in the city. For example, we went out and did site visits at 10 recreation and park facilities during the course of the audit, and we found that only 2 out of the 10 sites we visited did the staff that was present even know whether or not they had been identified as a shelter facility. No part-time and very few full-time staff had received training. Most facilities did not have emergency procedures on site, and employees of contractor community organizations who provide services like child care, recreation, food service, and other services had not received any training either. So we made recommendations on how the city should approach those things and try and bring those individuals into the fold and make sure that their facilities are.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Chair, if I could.
Go ahead.
Suggest,
Councilman.
It's obvious to us that we have not made them handicap ready and protected. Do you see this happening? Over what period of time are we going to make it so that the handicapped people with disabilities, obviously it costs a lot of money, and money is a problem. How do we deal with the fact we don't have the money and yet we have the need?
Councilmember, as you may know, the city has recently entered into a settlement agreement to bring their facilities up to ADA standards, and they've already begun a process now of evaluating those facilities and deciding what can be done in the short term and the long term. And that's going to be part of an overall strategy that's going to unfold over the course of the next couple of years.
And I might say, and I hate to be in the position to say this, but I'm a person right now with disabilities, and I frankly cannot move around without a certain amount of support. And I've even found in our great city hall here, there's differences with a rug here and a thing there and an indentation there. All these little things that we take for granted are a significant issue for people with this disability. So it's a big challenge. Do you get a sense of how much money it will cost and how much time it will take?
No, sir. I don't think we didn't do that kind of an assessment.
Yeah.
There has been an evaluation done by fire department personnel of the facilities, and those assessments are now being looked at by EMD, and they brought in a technical consultant to assist them with a plan for moving forward.
So, while we're not like New Orleans when we would have the flood, most likely it'd be an earthquake. Did we look at those structures, how survivability would take place in those structures?
We did not, in fact, do an assessment of the facilities. That was not our role. However, we have recommended that there be complete hazard and risk assessments done of the city's facilities, particularly at the airport and the port and at Recreation and Park, since the large number of people that would be there are utilizing those facilities. And in fact, the departments are moving in that direction. We've seen some movement already.
I know the last time we had a major earthquake, the Northridge quake, a lot of folks were setting up residency in the local parks, and the concern was that they get those folks relocated so the parks wouldn't turn into homeless encampments for a period of time, and they were for a period of time, and then they tried to relocate those folks as quickly as possible. But the structures themselves, as we would anticipate they would be able to withstand, and then I know in emergencies we use school auditoriums and school gymnasiums. I don't think we've ever done an analysis if they would withstand some of those earthquakes that we keep on talking about, that thank goodness haven't happened yet. But that'd be a whole other process.
It's a whole other process. I think that what we found pretty consistently in the departments is that they ensure that the facilities meet the building code standards at the time they were constructed, which does not necessarily mean that they meet current earthquake safety standards. As an example. So we've recommended that those assessments be conducted now and that the city...
So while you may have a facility, I don't think Rex and Parks will hear from them, have been provided with all of the basics, the water, the blankets, et cetera. Somehow that would all have to be transferred from wherever we have it, and then we can hear from the emergency management folks. So your focus was, do we have a place?
Well, it was partially, do we have the place? Are the individuals that are working at the place, are they trained on how to respond because they'll be on scene? Are there mechanisms in place to get critical supplies to those locations, such as water? That will be done through the Red Cross and through some other local partners, as well as the city departments. So there's a number of aspects to this, and we looked at that, and our report includes recommendations in virtually all of those areas.
Okay.
If I could.
Another question?
Yeah. Can I direct it at the airport? First of all, I was delighted to see that scanner that's invasive might be replaced. What's your sense from the TSA about that? They announced today, it was in the paper anyhow, that invasive body scan might disappear. Is that true?
That's what I am hearing, but I think I don't have any better information than you do, unless you came back from... Jackie Yaft, our Deputy Director for Operations, just came back from a National Airports Conference.
Yeah, it was not interesting.
Nothing new? Okay.
A year ago, almost a year ago, the Mayor's Blue Ribbon panel highlighted some issues. It wasn't the appointment of Ali Khan, is he here?
No, he's not here.
Well, wasn't that appointment to kind of bridge that and put it in a proper way? Do you agree with those recommendations, and what have we done to implement them, and what's your overall sense of that Blue Ribbon Commission panel?
Can we get to that? We want to finish with the control, then we can come to those questions. But if we can hear the rest of the report, and then we will open it up, because we've got other general managers here. So I want to try and stay on focus. Yeah, so go ahead. Continue. Okay, and then we will turn it over. We'll start with the airport and we'll go to the other departments. Go ahead.
The next major issue is related to the previous one, although it wasn't shelter specific. We took a look at the city's ability to serve individuals with disabilities or with special needs in the community in the event of a major disaster or other incident. And we found that there were several areas where there could be some improvement, and we made recommendations in those areas. One of the examples I'll give you, and when we were in here in 2008, the department had just received the results of a 2006 national peer review, and it was recommended in that report that they have that they develop the capacity to identify the location of individuals with disabilities in the event of an evacuation or some other special need that needed to be provided, a power outage, if there was specialized equipment, those kinds of things. There were some efforts initially. Those fell to the wayside. There were some difficulties working with the county on that. And to this day, when we came in there in 2012, there had still been no system established The fire department and the police department primarily use secondary sources such as DWP billing information for individuals who are getting discounts because of disability, as well as their knowledge of their own service areas in order to identify and locate these individuals in the community. So we've made recommendations in that area to strengthen that information base.
Is it computerized at all?
The county had begun to develop a computerized system back in 2008. That had not been implemented, and as of the 2012 review, the city had not gained access to that system. So there's been some attempt. It's received some criticism for inaccurate data. It's a self-reporting system. There's a number of issues with it. So it's an area that at some level, I think the city needs to work on a strategy for getting that. So you don't forget about individuals who may be in areas that need to be evacuated.
Right.
Okay. Then lastly, the economic recession and the resulting budget reductions have impacted the city's ability to effectively fund emergency management and department staff resources to coordinate emergency preparedness activities. And this could be exacerbated by the possibility that substantial federal and state funds could be curtailed.
Did you say substantial federal and state funds?
Yes. Over the last several years, after 9/11, there was a lot of federal money coming through, particularly for Homeland Security purposes, but there have been other monies that have come to just improve infrastructure and provide equipment and training and various things. That money, Congress has been curtailing that money. It's been cutting back. Mm-hmm. Large metropolitan areas like Los Angeles have been fortunate in that the money has been concentrated into these high-risk areas, and we've been able to sustain a good portion of the money that has been flowing through. But with the continued mood in Washington, it may be entering a new phase now, where we're seeing that the federal government is beginning to consolidate grants and change the method of reimbursement. Instead of direct reimbursement to jurisdictions, money may flow through the state, and there may be whole different processes.
And they take 25% off.
And they may take some portion of that, correct.
Well, it's normally been 25%.
Yeah.
Just to have the honor to give us the check.
Right. So at any rate, that's just an area to look at. Citywide, there's only 20 positions that are dedicated to this function. That's with all of the departments, including the enterprise activities. Few departments have looked at this strategically, I think, and with the budget cutbacks, we saw a lot of examples where departments were fitting it in around other duties and responsibilities. So managers would be assigned these functions in addition to their regular job.
You say 20 throughout the entire city?
20, and that includes 14 at EMD, and then the balance is at the other departments, with the majority of those being at LAWA and POLA. Yeah, so it's a very, very tight staffing level in order to do this major planning and coordination and training function. Another aspect of it is that in order to be able to implement emergency preparedness effectively, you have to be able to train your personnel, and that has become very difficult for the departments to do when their staff has been cut back and they have to do their regular duties. So to let them go for a day of training is difficult on the operations.
Okay.
That was pretty consistent through the organization.
Throughout all the departments?
Yeah.
Okay. So we just keep our fingers crossed and hope nothing happens. And then when it happens, we say, where's the help? I mean, that's not the way it should be.
No.
Anything else from the controller? Gina Marie, as the planes come in.
I could ask
Yes.
one more question.
We'll go ahead.
And I don't know if it's completely appropriate, but here
But
it
if
is.
it's not, we'll make it appropriate.
Well, we recommended the creation of a shared region-wide voice and data radio system, so everybody's on the same wavelength. Of course, I just read in the paper yesterday about the county and the city in some areas where there isn't that, cooperation of ambulance. That's another story. But are we making progress in creating a voice and data interconnected, understandable, compatible radio and data system?
The interoperable is what.
The interoperable communication system, yes, and the city has been working on that. There have been some bumps in the road, and it has not moved forward as quickly as would be desirable, but it's still an effort out there, and I think the mayor's office has been taking the lead on that.
It's only been about 10 or 11 years.
Yeah, well,
Will the mayor's office address that later and tell us the time frame and the schedule, so you have a little more comfort that we're getting it together? Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, interoperability, when I was on the National League of Cities board, that was an issue nationwide, and we haven't made much movement since the discussion became, I think it was after September 11th, and we've been talking and talking and talking, and now we're over 10 years later still talking and haven't done a darn thing on that. So, but thank you for the audit. Thank you very much. Jean Marie, as the planes come in.
Mr. Chairman, yes, the planes are coming in, thankfully.
Yes.
Consistently and safely. We're glad about that. However, since the topic of what we're here about is when they may not do that, I wanted to be available in case you had any concerns about the one recommendation that we disagreed with. And Jackie, who's our Deputy for Operations and Emergency Management, can give you the review of the other ones that we do agree with and what our status is. But the one that we, actually I should say we partially agreed and we partially disagreed. The controller and the auditor were recommending that we move the emergency management position to report to the chief operating officer, and referenced the recommendations out of the Blue Ribbon panel, which had as well agreed that the position for emergency management needed to be elevated, although they were recommending that it report to yet a different part of our organization. And during the Blue Ribbon panel process, we talked with the folks that were doing the review, and I wanted to take responsibility with you all for feeling very strongly that emergency management needs to be a part of airport operations, because it is so integrated with airport operations. And the Blue Ribbon panel agreed that we should give it an 18-month trial. We are 12 months into that 18 months. The reason I say we partially agreed is that we absolutely agreed, both with the Blue Ribbon panel and with the controller and their auditor, that the position needed to be elevated and there needed to be greater resources brought to the effort. So we created a new position. We made it an exempt position so that we could search throughout the country to try to find the best person to not only lead our emergency management but then to integrate that emergency management program into every one of the divisions of the airport. We searched actually twice to find the right person. That person is hired. He's here. Mr. Kinney, wave your hand. So I just wanted to be sure that I could explain to you all why we were taking a slightly different path than what was recommended by the controller.
And what kind of authority does he have then?
The authority to do whatever he needs to do within the organization. Certainly has the authority not only to work through Jackie, but to work through the chief operating officer and me.
So when you're dealing with the SkyCaps, you're dealing with the TSA, when you're dealing with the different vendors, et cetera, that authority would then transfer down to whatever would be necessary to maintain the consistency and the ability in the event of a situation that folks would be trained, everybody would be on the same page, and he'd have the authority to make sure that happens.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because that consistency is so important. I know that there was a training exercise, it may have been before you arrived, where they took the United terminal and shut it down.
And that would have been before I got here.
And they had a simulated terrorist attack where people came in and caused all kinds of things, and then they did a critique after that, and there were failures along the way. I mean, when they take different personnel, law enforcement from different agencies, which were there as part of the scenario, and then law enforcement started to say, okay, let's have some consistency. But you see the first person that you enter the airport, and then you see the person at the ticket gate, are they on the same page, or are they disconnected?
It's part of the challenge, frankly, and a lot of John's responsibilities are going to be ensuring that once the 5 detailed plans are put together, which are different subsets of the overall emergency management, that training throughout every one of those disciplines, both within the airport staff, but also, as you correctly point out, the many other entities that are operating at the airport. That's a challenge.
And there's some turnover in those personnel that you have to deal with also. So I know it's a cumbersome task. When you've got your personnel who are assigned the airport, they're permanent, whether it be law enforcement or the fire service or whatever the case may be. But then, like, if you had officers come in and out every single day, that'd be a real challenge to try and get consistency. And you have your vendors, that have the kiosks and the food vendors, et cetera, the Starbucks, whatever, and the personnel change, how are we going to keep them trained to have some consistency? That's the key. That here you've got basically the same staff every single day, so there's consistency. And I can see on the airport it would be a real challenge. Your folks on the tarmac, the baggage folks that drive those little trucks around the tarmac. I mean, you're talking about a huge task.
It's a challenge, which is why it makes it all the more important that the plans that we have are very clear, not lots of words. They are very clear on what everybody's role needs to be, because as those personnel change, they need to not have to read a 50-page report to figure out what they are supposed to do. So we're well on the way. I think that, as Jackie and John will tell you, we think we'll be the best in the business when we're finished, and we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we've got a lot of work that has been accomplished as well.
I just have to comment that you mentioned the 50-page report or book or guide. I was on a flight from somewhere to LAX, and they called an emergency on the airplane. So everybody's looking at the flight attendant, and she gets the manual out, and she's looking for the emergency. I think, if you're looking at emergency procedures now, God help us. And it makes you think about, you need to know that before the emergency, and everything worked out fine, but you think they're supposed to know, and they turn to those folks and say, your flight attendant is supposed to be the one who's going to assure you we've got everything under control, instead looking through what am I supposed to do.
That's right.
That reminds me, you said the 50-page manual. Okay, sounds good. So the airport in general terms, you would say, is on the right path from your perspective?
Councilmember, yes, they are. We would prefer to see that function elevated a little higher, but they have done a number of extraordinary steps to strengthen that, including bringing in a new Deputy Director of Homeland Security and Public Safety, and trying to integrate this process better at the airport.
How high up is the individual? Can he report to you? Does he report to you?
Reports to Jackie as the Deputy Director of Operations and Emergency Management. Jackie reports to the Chief Operating Officer. The Chief Operating Officer reports to me.
Okay.
However, this is significantly higher in the organization than it ever was before.
And this was all part of the blue ribbon and this review from the controller that brought this about. Okay. Now, is he permanent or temporary?
Permanent.
Okay.
Unless there's anything I ought to know.
Now,
this would not be the time to tell me, by the way.
He's looking to say, wow, I thought I was permanent. All right. So thank you for the airport. Any more questions from the airport?
I'm just curious, when Polly and I walked around the airport, we didn't see much visibility of uniformed airport police.
And I remember we called you after that.
Yep. Great.
We obviously saw LAPD at various spots. And then we questioned it just from a standpoint of a person is going on a plane or leaving a plane, and they see them, that it might have some impact. I know you've changed that. Would you tell us what the visibility is now and the coordination, cooperation between LAPD and the airport?
Can I take those in reverse order?
Sure.
I think the coordination between LAPD and the airport police is getting better and better. Frankly, I think the communication is better. I think lots of things are happening better. I can't say for certainty that we have absolutely changed the deployment at the airport to have the certified LEOs in the front. I think we have not. It's been a strategy to have the civilian officers out front to try to deal with the traffic, and to have the certified LEOs in the terminals as much as possible. But I would want to take an IOU to actually have RF, who I think would be better to tell you what our strategy is there. We have the people there. They are not, the blue uniforms are not the ones you will typically see a lot on the sidewalk. You will see the brown uniforms there. You will see the blue uniforms more in the terminals and in the squad cars that are going around the perimeter, and the motorcycles that are patrolling on the roads.
Back to that other thing which we read in the paper today about potential different screening mechanisms, less evasive. How is our relationship with the TSA? And there was a point in the past that we talked about maybe getting rid of them, bringing in a private group, or there was some support in Washington in various circles. What's your take on the TSA screening and the future of that?
We have an application to submit for entering the private screening partnership program that is on Jackie's desk. It has been completed, and we will very seriously consider submitting that once we understand what's happening by the end of November. We would likely not want to do it wholesale. As you well know, we've got 9 terminals, and so trying to have a wholesale change of what is TSA screening versus what is private screening would be like jumping into the deep end of the pool. What we'd like to do is probably take 2 terminals and give it a shot to try the private screening. That way it's a little bit like wading into the pool and finding out whether we think it's better or not.
Oh.
But we have not submitted that application yet. We are still very seriously considering doing so.
I think that's a great idea to consider that. At least put it out there and see if it can work. That's it.
That breaking news, because that wasn't on the agenda, so if someone's listening, there you go, Gene. You're going to get a lot of questions on that one.
I tried to be careful.
I can hope so. Okay, that's good. The airport, and this also applies, did you just do LAX or did you do Van Nuys, Ontario, or was it just LAX?
We looked at the department-wide program, but we did not do any assessments of the facilities per se. So.
Okay. And do you have similar operations at Van Nuys and LAX and Ontario?
The emergency management program that we're working on would cover all of our airports.
Okay.
So the planning programs, the specific application would be different because the facilities are different, but the overall programs and how we train people would be the same.
And the gentleman's in charge of all 3?
That's correct.
Okay, very good.
Just 2 quick ones. The runway status lights, the red lights, where are we in getting that throughout the entire?
I believe FAA, keep me honest here, are they in the design process?
Yes, January is the date for them to do the closure date for the runway would be late January. They have just awarded the contract, so FAA will be coming in to install the other set of lights, the phase 2.
And for people's information, these runway status lights, these red lights, are a very effective way in dealing with safety issues.
They're another belts and suspenders.
And we were very happy that they moved forward with. And the last on that same level was the tower. The dream was to get to 47 certified tower folks. We got, I think, to 35. We have trainees. Do you have any sense of how many certified folks there are up in the tower right now?
Councilman, I do not know. Do you?
I don't.
We can certainly get back to you on that. We'll give you a current status.
Great.
Okay, Gina, thank you. Thanks for coming down. Thank you very much. Why don't you stay up here, Controller, and let's hear from the, we're going to hear from Jim last, since he's the coordinator for all. Let's hear from Rex and Parks. Since you have all the facilities that we use.
Good afternoon, everyone. Regina Adams, Executive Officer for Recreation and Parks. When we met with the auditor, we were very forthcoming as we knew that we had a lot of shortcomings, and we explained to them the situation that we were facing. And so we're not surprised by some of the things that are in this audit. However, we also, there's like one of the recommendations in here which requires, since we have the sheltering role, and we have hundreds of facilities, of course we don't use all of them for sheltering, but one of the recommendations in here is to have all of our facilities check for their seismic status. And we stated that that's not going to be something that's going to happen anytime soon or anytime quickly. And of course, it also requires resources beyond Recreation and Parks, because it also require the Bureau of Engineering and Building and Safety and others to assist in that process. So that's going to be something that's going to show up on this controller's report for quite some time. But we also, too, as we recognize, and it also has previously stated, of course, these last few years we've lost a lot of resources. We've lost hundreds of people, and of course those people were managers and so forth, and they were the ones who had previously, we had started trying to provide training to. The remaining employees, of course, no, we have not been able to get to them and train them and so forth, so we were not surprised when the auditors went out and they found that, the only 2 out of 10 or whatever they spoke to didn't know certain things. And I personally was very forthcoming with telling them that and saying, I'm not surprised if those are things you're going to find out there. What we've also tried to do, we are working with the Emergency Management Department, and we're also trying to reassign staff within the department now to try to assist with us getting back on our point. initially we had some resources, we have some positions where we had started actually doing some training with the employees. We even had done an evacuation program one day at the observatory with the public there. And we did, just a little exercise to evacuate them, direct everybody and so forth. But we've fallen behind in trying to continue to do that. So we are trying to get back to, getting back on track, but it is going to take us some time. And as far as for the disability, the ADA assessments and so forth, it's the same type of situation. We do what we can, besides, us having a sheltering role and so forth, of course, with all the facilities that we have out there, we have other issues that we're trying to address as well, slip and fall issues and other things, just like you were talking about. But, we are very cognizant of what we have out there, what our role is, and we take it very seriously, because we'd even started trying to, a few years ago, trying to buy more emergency generators, because, of course, if we have people coming to our sites, and, of course, there's no power, we needed to have more generators, and we had to have the, the Piglet thing so that we could even pull up a generator and be able to connect it to our facilities. So we had started a few years ago trying to move in that direction and trying to, get our training on track and everything. And over these last few years, with our budget shortcomings and so forth, we haven't been able to continue to do that in any way, shape, or form on the level we were trying to get to.
I can understand that, because I know that we rely on Recs and Parks for basically anything and everything. Summertime, fill the pools, have the lifeguards out there, and then you got the soccer, and you got the this, and you got the that, and well, you've got the facility and the space. It's the components that really need to be put into place, and the training and the consistency of personnel. I can understand the challenge. Without additional funds, how do you manage to do something to improve?
One of the things we just done, and I brought him with me, is we have Brian Lamb. He's actually one of our recreation facility directors, so we have pulled him off the assignment. He used to be in charge of one of our other facilities, and now we have him working with our senior park ranger, Albert Torres, and we're going to try to get back into a training program. As a matter of fact, he participated in an exercise today, which was the tabletop for Griffith Park. So we're setting up a program, and he reports to Kevin Regan, our assistant general manager, who oversees our emergency operations section. And so what we're doing is we're trying to get back to putting together a program as to training for the employees. And of course, we also have various concessionaires and others out there, which were, also mentioned in this audit, that we will also have to pull them in. And, we also have people leasing our facilities, nonprofits, and so forth, so that we would have to come up with some program with them as well as to get them trained, and so that they'll know what their role is as well.
So what do you think about Recs and Parks? How do we manage to improve that with all of the facilities where they could house people, but the lack of funding for training of the personnel that have been shrinking over the last few years? In fact, I read a report today that the mayor's coming out with additional cuts. I don't know if you've seen that, but there's additional cuts that he's now proposing just because the budget's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. So, I know Mr. Muckery and I know the staff there, they try to do the best they can, but you can only fly an airplane if you got fuel. If you don't have any fuel, it's going to sit on the ground. They got facilities, but how do we staff it and how do we train them with the lack of funds? How would you recommend that we proceed with that?
Well, Council Member, I think it's a challenge in every major metropolitan area in the United States right now, and in California in particular, there's these same difficulties that are being presented to public sector managers and elected officials. It's a priority area, I know, for the City of Los Angeles, and I think a lot of our recommendations recognize that it's not something that can be immediately fixed, but there should be the capacity to begin to strategically plan to do these things over time. So as an example, repairing all of the facilities or bringing them up to seismic standards, yes, that's going to be a multi-year effort. No one's expecting it to be done overnight or a huge investment to be made to bring those facilities up, but it needs to rise to the level of being seriously considered and moving forward on a regular basis. As far as the staffing goes, as the economy recovers and the city's financial position improves, which I'm convinced it will in time.
You know when, so I can start buying some stock?
I wish I did, Council Member.
I want to start buying some stock.
Sessions during this development of this gray air. But eventually there'll be a time when the city will begin to rebuild, and these are things that need to be on your plate.
So obviously, we're not going to have improvements immediately, but down the road, we hopefully will be able to get the resources to make it happen. In the meantime, we get along with what we've got, and in the event we have an incident, and the other aspect I have is, like, when something occurs in the community, you have a situation, you have to evacuate large population into a park off hours. Is there, because if 311 shuts down, how do we get a hold of someone to have access to facilities after hours, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning?
Well, what we usually do is we work through our park rangers, and we also work with the emergency management department, but we also have some call lists that we can call some of our directors to try to get them in. I mean, the same thing happens, even like in the summertime when we activate our, cooling centers, and sometimes, we try to call people in and get them in, and those directors usually have the keys to the facilities and so forth, and we try to get them in the best way we can.
Do you have connection through the police dispatch where they have emergency off-hour numbers?
They do, but not for all of the employees, of course, but for some of us, yes. Certain contacts we do have, yes.
Because I know we used to call 311 off hours, and they were there 24 hours a day, but 311's not there after hours anymore. And in the event something we have to evacuate a neighborhood for a barricaded suspect or whatever, in the closest facilities, a Rex and Parks facility, to have that access. Because if you don't have 311, if you don't have the person's number, I don't know how you're going to get a hold of them.
Well, that's something that...
Call Jim Featherstone.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, because I used to use 311 all the time, and when they shut down 6 or 7 o'clock, whatever it is, and you don't have the person's personal number. Unfortunately, I have John Muckery's number, so I'll call him. But if I didn't have that for some area that they say we need to evacuate, we need to have that access. So we will be publishing Mr. Featherstone's number throughout, at least with the department heads and the supervisors, and each watch commander and each police station should have it, and the same with the fire stations, because off hours, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you got to put these people someplace.
We do have that, not for everything, but for some things in particular, but also, too, with this current OPS consolidations, LAPD, which we're working with them on, we will definitely make sure that happens.
Yeah, we need to make sure that just in the event something happens. Because was part of it access, how we would get a hold of someone off hours? Was that part of the audit?
That's a standard component of the emergency plans for each department, that they maintain a list, and as long as that is updated regularly, it should be accurate. But certainly the top officials in every department are listed on that document with contact information.
See, we haven't had an update for a while, because I used to get those updates, and we haven't had that for a while. So I don't know if that would come probably out of the mayor's office, I would assume, or emergency management somehow.
Council member, this is a standard component of the emergency plan, which is updated annually. And that's one of the areas of improvement that we've seen since 2008 with Mr. Featherstone coming in, and that those plans are being kept updated, and there is at least an effort annually to make sure the information is correct.
Then the dissemination to the different offices and the different general managers.
We have recommendations to strengthen some of
them. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's go to the port.
One more question real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry. Come back.
The bigger issue, of course, is if we have an earthquake and we have to evacuate people and put them in a place. Do we have in our facilities cots and tents and medical stuff, any of that kind of response?
No, we work very closely with the American Red Cross, and at some of our facilities, we actually have allowed them to put in containers so that it has those supplies readily available. Because for us, we just provide the site, the restrooms and so forth, but we work with the Red Cross to provide all the cots and everything.
So if we were to have an earthquake, this afternoon or something, there are cots there now? Or?
In some of the locations, there are containers that the American Red Cross, we have had them strategically placed at some of our locations.
And we even look at the idea of maybe a tent if there's not enough space in the facility?
No, we haven't looked at a tent per se, but yeah.
Well, we've used school auditoriums, school gymnasiums, Rex and Parks. I mean, it depends on what's closest.
It all depends, right? Because, like I say, for the incident commander and so forth, it makes a determination whether it's going to be at our, one of a school, it's going to be at a recreation and parks facility, or whatever.
Yeah, it's always closest to the venue. Okay.
Great.
Thank you. All right, the port. From Santa Clarita to City Hall. Aaron, how's the port doing today? Sunny and bright or cloudy and overcast?
Always sunny and bright at the port.
Okay.
Aaron Gross, the Port of Los Angeles. I can defer to the Controller's Office, but there were 5 recommendations from the Controller's Office, one of which has been implemented, 3 of which are in process, and one of which the issue that you discussed regarding the airport is similar to the port.
In the pecking order?
Yeah, similar.
Reporting.
Similar. We're actually going through a staffing study right now with our port police. The current pecking order is that the emergency manager reports to the chief of police. The chief of police reports to the deputy executive director over operations, who then reports to the executive director. But we are currently going through a staffing study, and that issue is currently under review.
Okay. Mr. Controller, you agree with that? If not, they'll take you on the lobster boat.
Yes, again, they're moving in the right direction. Actually, when we did the study, it was one level lower in the police organization.
So they moved it up.
At least this is moving in the correct direction in our view.
Okay. And the port has, I've been to the Maritime Law Enforcement facility.
Law Enforcement Training Center, yes.
Yeah.
It's an excellent new facility. It's the first MOU with the federal government to train law enforcement, maritime law enforcement on all sorts of emergency needs, whether underwater bomb detection, boarding a boat, anything having to do with law enforcement, maritime law enforcement. And we train any local jurisdictions. They come in a great curriculum. We're actually working really closely with the federal government. The Secretary of Homeland Security came and opened the center to establish the memorandum of understanding. It's a great facility.
Great facility. And I know you got video operations all over the place.
Absolutely.
Watch everything that's going on. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you. Keep up the good work.
And when you mentioned 3 and 2, what are the 3 that are in a certain direction? The other 2, just a line on each of them.
Sure. So one of them is interagency coordination. The controller suggested that there be a better coordination with the Port of Long Beach and local and regional entities. We have formalized monthly meetings with the Port of Long Beach, and we also have quarterly meetings with all of the related agencies, including the Navy, the Coast Guard, Port of Long Beach Police, the City of Long Beach. So we've implemented those. Another one was conduct a comprehensive threat and hazard risk assessment of our properties, including security and earthquake vulnerability assessments. And that is ongoing. It's being conducted right now. That recommendation is associated with another recommendation, which is to develop a realistic plan for long-term mitigation of facility and infrastructure vulnerabilities. And that's contingent upon the completion of the threat and hazard risk assessment that we're working on, and the schedule is it's intended to be completed by the end of this year. I'm sorry, by the end of next year, December 31st, 2013. Okay,
the containers, which we always worry about having this or that, I know we check them at their departure place and also here. How is that going?
We currently, they're randomly selected. If there's some indication that that something has gone wrong, then they're flagged and taken to customs, and customs takes a look at them. Every container that comes to the port is screened for radioactive potential. So that is 100% of the containers that come through. But as far as any other threats, it's usually visually any indication that we've got that there's any problem with it, and we'll take a closer look at that.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Okay. What's the next one up? We heard from Airport, Rex and Parks Port. I know there's another couple. Convention Center. No more Farmers Field. Now they want Dodger Stadium. Did you hear about that?
Oh, I've heard about that. Yes, sir.
Amazing how things changed in one day.
Yes, Philip Hill, CEO, Interim General Manager, Los Angeles Convention
Center. I knew you'd rise up someday.
There you go.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Well, you were the assistant for a long time.
Yes, approximately 10 years, believe it or not.
You did your homework.
Yes, sir.
So how prepared are you? Because you've got a vast facility to house people, that's for sure.
We have quite a bit there. Definitely want to thank the controller and the auditor. We take emergency management extremely seriously, and we have received and complied with all recommendations. And so we are in good standing with our controller as far as having met these recommendations. It's very interesting. We worked very closely with Jim and team out of EMD. They're an outstanding team, and they've done a lot. I know something was mentioned about the relationships, but it's really important to talk about what those relationships mean and how rapidly we can adapt to a disaster, because we kind of avoid all the formalities at the beginning. We know each other's capabilities and we can move pretty rapidly. So I'd like to say that I'm highly impressed with the EMD and what they've done. Of course, we always have room for improvement, and we'll keep improving. But we have strong collaboration with EMD, with LA Fire, and LA Police, of course, with California Hospital, let's say infectious disease control, hemodialysis studies, disaster pharmacy, related things, and how we can adapt differently. I also sit on the board of the American Red Cross Disaster and Emergency Response. And in answer to your question, Councilmember Rosenthal, we also have the large containers on site, 6 of them. We have approximately 4,700 cots, blankets, hard supplies ready to go. Of course, not quite enough to handle a 30 to 50,000 person convention, but it kind of gives us a good start as we move into working with the Red Cross for the more sustained effort and logistics package of how we move forward. But I'd again like to say thank you very much to the Controller. And
Any disagreement, Controller? Were they right online?
No disagreements.
No disagreements. See, that's because you're the assistant. Now you've taken over the top spot.
yes, sir.
You made it work well.
Very good.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank
Keep
you,
up
sir.
the good work. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have another one? Other department?
DOT,
DOT. Who else is after that?
EMD and the mayor's office.
What was after DOT?
EMD and
EMD.
the office of the mayor.
Okay, we'll do the mayor before we do the emergency operations. Okay, go ahead, please.
Hi,
Who you are?
Christine Mata from DOT. We had 2 recommendations from the Controller's Office. One was to develop a mutual aid assistance program, and with that, we have began holding meetings with LAUSD as well as the Taxi Corporation to assist with evacuations. The other recommendation was the threat and hazard assessment of our facilities, and that is also in progress. So we're working with Building and Safety on that.
They're right in line?
Yes, sir.
Because there is that aspect of massive evacuations where you have something that occurs. And do we have arrangement with the school buses, with MTA, with city buses, where we have to move large numbers of people and not a lot of roadway to move them? Have we done anything on that arena, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge, Ed.
Actually, Councilmember Zine, prior to the beginning of our audit, there had been an effort by DOT to join a consortium of various entities that provide transportation services. And so they have worked together on a response plan, and we did review that during the course of the audit. So they have done some work in that area. It's a continuing effort.
So hopefully that continuing effort will come to some conclusion where we'll be able to have that cooperation. Because if you got to move, for example, seniors or schools where you have a large number of folks that aren't driving and you've got to move them to a different area, to have buses come in and load them up and then successfully evacuate them. I mean, we always look at the possibilities down the road, and you want to prepare for any and all eventualities. And then we look back and we say, why didn't we do this, why didn't we do that? We're trying to get ahead of the curve instead of regretting it afterwards. Okay, so DOT is on board. Thank you. How about the mayor's office? And then we'll hear from Jim, who's got it all. Mayor's office is not here. Nobody from the mayor's office. How'd that happen? Oh, they are here? Oh, she did? And then we'll hear from you last, Jim, because you're the one who's got overall umbrella responsibility for everything. It's probably easier at the fire department. Where is she, Margot? She's not there? What? You can speak loudly. It's no secret. There's no secrets here. It's a transparent committee.
They're available, sir. They're looking to see whether they're going to be able to attend today's meeting. They might have to follow up on another day.
What do you have to say for that, Jim?
Under no circumstances would I dare speak for the mayor's office.
Smart man. Smart man. That's why you got the job you have. It wasn't for your experience, it was for your brains. And your common sense. So you're responsible for all departments, all personnel citywide, and EMD with the controller and the responsibility and your authority to mandate, to direct, to order. I think there's some gaps in that, and maybe we need to do something to correct that situation. So why don't you give us a synopsis, and then we will ask some questions and take it from there.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Zine, Mr. Rosendahl, for the opportunity to speak before this committee. I'd also like to thank the Controller's Office and Mr. Foti and his team. We've had the privilege of being audited twice during my short tenure. So we were audited in less, I think I hadn't been in this position a year for the first audit, and then it was 08, and then Mr. Foti and his team came in again, 12, finished in 12.
Yeah, finished in 12.
So, which we actually embraced their work. I thought their work was very fair. It pointed out, initially pointed out gaps in the 08 audit, which we incorporated into our first ever strategic plan, and the findings, a number of the findings from the current audit, we are actually in the process right now incorporating it into our 12-15 strategic plan. The gaps identified in the 08 audit helped me with a path forward, helped codify issues that I felt we needed to address in terms of emergency management within the department and also citywide. And the gaps identified in the current audit were either issues we were already working on or the issues that we didn't openly or dramatically disagree with. I think there were 29 recommendations for EMD. 5 were implemented by the time that the final report came out. 20 are in progress. 1 didn't apply anymore, and there are 3 that we disagreed with. And I think our disagreement was valid. A number of things have happened. We looked at the audit. The first audit, I figured, geez, an audit, and I was really worried because I had never been through an audit process. I learned to embrace the audit process, and so we were notified of the second audit. That's the way we looked at it again, as an opportunity for improvement as opposed to some persecutory effort. So that's how we looked at it. And having worked with Mr. Foti and his team before, I had every expectation, and it was well-founded, that the audit would be fair. It was tough, but I thought it was very fair. When you were speaking before I started to talk, you were talking about our ability to direct and mandate, et cetera. That's one of the challenges, and I think the audit speaks to that, that EMD basically, I have no statutory or directive capability over any of the operating departments other than the power to convene. That's all the power that EMD has. So, but we use that convening power, in quotes, to bring the city's capability and elements and disciplines together in times of crisis or potential crisis. And I would like to think that we've made tremendous steps from one audit to the next, although we understand that there are a lot of things we can still improve on.
So when you talk about implementation recommendations, would we need to strengthen the ordinance? Would we need to strengthen the authority of the EMD? A directive from the mayor to general manager is obviously a directive, and they obviously need to follow. How do we strengthen your direction to the departments to get in compliance? I mean, it's something that's reasonable versus unreasonable. And if you want to be a tyrant, you can come up with some crazy ideas, but if you're logical and reasonable and you come up with things that are really beneficial, and if you could find funding, I'm sure they'd be happy to do it. But how do we, other than making recommendations and convening, how do we say that this is the mandate and they have to follow? It's like the controller. The controller can tell the department, you're out of money, I'm not going to write any more checks. That gets their attention. Obviously, money talks. How do we have your department, which is obviously critical in the time of urgency and necessity, when it's a beautiful sunny day and everybody's having a good time, but when disaster strikes, they're going to turn to you and say, why didn't you do this? Why'd you buy the sandwiches up there versus down here? I'll never forget that. And they weren't that good anyway. But how do we give you the authority to actually mandate departments do what they're supposed to do, instead of ignoring it and say, hey, no big deal?
I think to some degree is to revise the ad code. The current ad code language, as it's applicable to emergency management, is a little dated. I know that the revisions are in the process. They've moved beyond my office. The other thing is that Executive Directive 15, the mayor issued that back in the spring, which gives more direction in terms of departments complying with their annual emergency plans. But I think as you yourself and Councilmember Rosendahl have done is to continue to make emergency management matter to all the city departments. Here in America, we tend to be okay with things until something bad happens, unfortunately. You know, for us, essentially bad things happen to other people, not knowing that at any minute we are the other person.
Right.
I think what the current council and the current mayor's administration have done is to make emergency management part of the public safety equation. That's gone a long way. Making emergency management matter by the senior electeds in the city has done a lot, but that's an implied authority as opposed to a codified authority.
Now, we need it codified. So how do we do that, Mr. Adrian?
There were recommendations that were addressed to the mayor's office to actually propose changes to the ad code.
Are they actually moving on it?
They, as far as I understand, they have been drafted and they're being reviewed by the city attorney.
So it's okay, because we need to give that authority to you or whomever's in charge of that department if we're going to take it serious, versus, hey, no big deal. And if we spend the time, energy, and resources to do the audit, we find out there's a gap, and you have some general managers that don't care, others that care a lot, and some are in between. We need to understand this is a critical issue, because when it hits and things aren't right, they're going to start coming after people. And you don't want to be the person in that chair to say, hey, I told you, you didn't listen to me. I told you, you made the change, and then the general manager, because that's how I hold responsible as general managers. And you are a general manager, obviously, but you need to have the resources and the authority to tell people what to do.
Yes, sir.
In the time of crisis. So that's moving forward, which gives me the confidence to know that we're making progress. I mean, it's not all like the convention center that they're obviously doing everything they need to do, and a huge facility that would house a lot of people in the event something were to take place. And who knows what may be the case, whether it's natural or some terrorism is the issue that we have to deal with on a daily basis. What about the cost to EMD to implement recommendations? Do you have the resources financially to do what has to be done?
No, sir.
Okay.
Unfortunately, out of the 14 emergency managers that I have, 18 are grant funded. And as Mr. Foti mentioned earlier, the federal grants are shrinking every year. This is something that we, certainly I worry about it as a department head, but I think the city needs to look at the fact that in previous grant years, we've actually been forced to move general funded positions to where they're funded by by the federal grants. But as that begins to shrink, then we run the risk of shrinking EMD staffing more so. And right now, we have a world-class emergency management program in this city. We're probably one of the smallest big city emergency management staffs. My counterpart, Joe Bruno, in New York, has 190 people in his shop. I have a fraction of that.
You have 14 people?
I have more than 14 people in the department. I have 14 professional emergency managers.
For a city size of 4 million people?
Yes, sir.
Now, we have the CERT team, and there's another office out of the mayor.
The crisis response
team. Do you work with all of those components?
We work with them, but they have different mandates. The CERT team is more for actually the tip of the spear, which is neighborhoods and neighbors responding and helping each other. The crisis response team is to go out and provide psychological assistance to people in catastrophic situations. That could be a shooting tonight or the earthquake tomorrow.
And then the CERT?
CERT is the boots on the ground, neighbors helping neighbors, neighborhoods helping neighborhoods. So
that's what the fire department?
The fire department runs the CERT program.
Okay.
Which is fantastic.
Yes, it is.
They do well.
One of the things that we're looking at with CERT, and we've been talking with fire about it, is creating another avenue for certain volunteers, especially folks with disabilities or access and functional needs issues, because let's say, for instance, to check in or manage people in and out of the EOC during a significant evacuation, a person who maybe is assisted, has a mobility assistance challenge that may not be able to go out and do search and rescue with other CERT volunteers can certainly provide a volunteer role in the EOC. That frees up a professional emergency manager for me to use in other capacities.
And your facility has all the your facility has all the equipment, I should say, to do the job.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else on this fine man, Mr. Featherstone, who's got all of the responsibilities to make sure the sandwiches are fresh and tasty?
No, nothing more at this time.
You want to say something else?
Councilmember Zine, when you were talking with Rec and Parks about the after-hours notification, EMD has a 24-hour duty officer who they answer the phone 24 hours a day. We also, I think it was in either July or August, we became a sub-recipient to LA County Sheriff's Alert LA County program, their contract, which is the mass notification system that we have.
The callback?
It's a call out. We notify neighborhoods for evacuation or shelter in place. This is simple. We draw a polygon on a map. It identifies all the 911 telephones in that area. They get a robocall, and if the occupants have done the self-registry, they not only get a robocall to their landline phone, they get a robocall to the cell phone, a text message, and an email message. All that goes out. We've been pushing it. The county's had it about 3 years. They have somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000 people registered. We've registered in less than 2 months. We've registered over 5,000 people. So we're really pushing that, the Alert LA County, so that we can have our citizens more informed. And that's that after-hours capability. When we had 311 go away, we looked for an alternative for mass notification. So we use the Alert LA County for mass notification and critical decision-making notification after hours.
And what's the number for mass notification? How would the citizen report sign up for that?
Hopefully the citizen, go to alertlacounty.org. I don't have my brochure. alertlacounty.org, and the citizens can self-register right there. We're also looking at other. Mr. Fody was talking about the program the county was using. A registry for folks, for citizens with disabilities, access and functional needs, older adults, or with latchkey children. We're looking at a number of different products so that one of the challenges we've had is the registry to some members of the disabilities community has a stigma if it's a disabilities registry. So we've been looking for a general registry, and we have a number of products we're considering so that anyone can register. Let's say I live in a condo complex and I have a keyed access. So when my number, the responders pull up my name and number out of the registry. They say, Jim Featherstone, my code is ABCD. Or Jim Featherstone, my wheelchair is the first room on the right once you enter my house. The registries that we're looking at are registries that allow everyone to register so that folks with disabilities don't feel stigmatized by a disabilities registry.
And so that's alertlacounty.org. So we want to...
I'm sorry, alertlacounty.gov.
.gov. See, the convention center comes through once again. That's why he's so sharp. Always on the job. So alertlacounty.gov. We will put that out through our e-blast, and I'm going to have, I don't want to put this out for public information, but the 24-hour EMD number, I'll have Adrian get a hold of you. And
it's the duty officer, yes, sir.
Yeah, we'll get that number, because I don't have that number. We should have that.
Yes, sir.
And the mayor's office is not here, so what we're going to do is we're going to recommend on these matters that because the mayor's office is not here, we'll continue the item because the mayor's office hasn't reported, but everyone else we will release from the various departments, airport, Recs and Parks, Port, Convention Center, DOT, and EOD. Thank you. And then we will, here at next meeting, we'll continue just for the mayor's office to get their review on this. You don't necessarily have to come back, but the controller's representative can come back just to make sure we chaperone that through. So with that, Mr.
Just one question. Everything has been great here. Do you have any relationship like in my canyons where we get a reverse one when we know there's a fire potential and put it out. We have a great system, the fire department work. Do you interface at all with that?
In fact, the fire department's IT folks were over talking with my lead on my Alert LA County lead person to see if we could actually use Alert LA County for the red flag alerts.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. All right, that's good. So that's what we'll do is we'll continue it for the mayor's report and everyone else. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for the controller and for the audit. Appreciate that. Let's go to number 3. There's a request from Ms. Alarcon to bring number 3 forward, so we will accommodate that.
All right.
Number 3.
Item number 3, continued from February 28, 2012. Motion, Zion Weezer, relative to request of the Board of Public Works to report in regard to identifying all contracts administered by the board where the contractor and the city share a dedicated stream of revenue, determining the amount of revenue that the city receives annually, setting forth which contractors are in compliance with the terms of the agreement, including revenue sharing, and identifying existing internal controls to monitor contract compliance. This matter has also been referred to the Public Works Committee.
Take it away.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Zion, Councilmember Rosendahl. It is always a pleasure to be back before you and always great to see you, Councilmember. I'm here to provide an oral report back in response to your motion about the department's contractual oversight, which was originated in response to a council discussion about our citywide bus bench program. Concerns first arose about that program through our board's contractual oversight committee. So in response to all of those concerns, the board did a few things. We initiated an investigation of the matter, ultimately terminated the city's relationship with the contractor, initiated a new RFP process, and ultimately entered into a new contract with a new provider. We're just coming upon our 1-year anniversary with our new bus bench program, and we're happy to report a few things. One, that we received the full extent of the revenues allowed to the city under the new terms of the contract. And that over 2,200 new or replacement bus benches have in fact been installed, and that every council district now has its minimum 225 benches. In light of the experiences of our bus bench program, the board has thoroughly reviewed all of its contracts to ensure that we have in place sufficient internal controls to monitor contract compliance and to guarantee that for revenue generating contracts that the city is maximizing its revenue potential. Based on our review, we are confident that each contract contains the proper control mechanisms in place. For instance, the Bureau of Engineering, which deals with personal services contracts, has a publicly accessible project delivery manual, which clearly outlines how invoices should be reviewed and approved and how disputes should be resolved. Chapter 6 of the manual specifically notes some key considerations for reviewing invoices, which include: 1, was the work appropriate under the terms of the contract? 2, was a directive given by the city to do the work? 3, does the invoice contain the required backup information? And is the invoice mathematically correct? Now, these threshold considerations of invoices ensure fiscal management and proper accounting so that the city knows that it's getting what it's paying for. Each of the 5 bureaus in the Department of Public Works and the board have similar mechanisms in place. I am joined by other members of our board as well as representatives of each of the bureaus who are more than happy to respond to any specific questions that you may have.
Thank you. Dr. Weissman, you weren't here when we finished that, so the item that we discussed, well, you're on number 3. Okay, we did number 1, so we could hear from you on number 3, because I had noticed you weren't in the room when we... No, I know. We're on number 3 now. So there's no other contracts out there where we have limited controls in place for those contracts in which the city receives revenue. We want to make sure that whatever those contracts are, and I know that we've had some contracts that maybe there have been some gaps and some holes and some less than what we would assume would be properly done, maybe by the contract with the vendor, with the city. Everything that we have now is in place where we're receiving what we need to receive. They're complying, doing the reports as they should do on a semi-annual or annual basis, that there's no surprises.
Yes. And when we specifically took a look at our revenue-generating contracts in the department, we have a total of 9. Only 2 of our bureaus actually have revenue-generating contracts. The Bureau of Contract Administration, the Bureau of Engineering, and the Bureau of Street Lighting don't have any revenue-generating contracts. So the 2 bureaus that are impacted are the Bureau of Sanitation and the Bureau of Street Services. We reviewed all 9 of those contracts, and we are maximizing the revenue potential.
Excellent. And that revenue obviously goes into our general fund.
Some of it goes to our general fund. So, for instance, the bus bench contract, that money actually goes to our street furniture fund.
Which is a whole other story.
That's right.
I don't want to get into that one. That is a whole nother story. I don't think it's necessary to bring the other folks up because you're the commission that's reviewed it, that makes sure it's in compliance. I appreciate the fact that they're here. Dr. Weissman, some comments on number 3? Okay. Okay. So with that, Mr. Rosendahl?
It's great. Thank you.
So thank you for I know there's been some time to get that done, and we appreciate it. The bottom line is we have a contract with the vendor. They got to comply. We got to comply on our end. We get the revenues. They do the job. Everybody goes away happy. And the commission is then pleased, and we're all pleased. And then the mayor doesn't have to start making more cutbacks. As you may have seen today, he's come out with a recommendation for more cutbacks, which affects the office of city operations. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
you.
Well,
Let's go to number 2.
Mr. Chair, the final action on item 3.
Note and file.
Item number 2, motion, Zion Krikorian, relative to instructing the Information Technology Agency and General Services Department to report the results of their request for information for multifunctional printers and managed print services. This matter was referred to the Audits and Governmental Efficiency Committee on October 12, 2012.
All right. Take it away.
Good afternoon, council members. Mark Wolf, Executive Officer with ITA.
Roger Fernandez from ITA.
Deborah Ramos from GSD.
Ken Desowitz from GSD.
First, I'd like to start off. We'd like to give you a verbal report and update on managed print services and what both the Department of Information Technology Agency as well as General Services has been doing in this area. First, I'd like to start by just providing a brief definition of managed print services so everyone's on the same page. Managed print services is a newer terminology that's been evolved, that's come about in the last few years, and it really involves the use of an external provider that would assess, optimize, and manage an organization like the City of Los Angeles's document printing and copying in order to lower costs and improve productivity and efficiency. Today, the city utilizes city staff to support printers and an outside vendor for repairs. In addition to that, we utilize a commodity contract for supplies and consumables. So different than this current support model, in a managed print services environment, an outsourced provider would provide all of the services that I described. In addition, in today's environment for the support for both printing and copying, General Services also has a publishing services group that performs large print and duplication jobs for the city departments and elected offices. So to bring you up to date, back in 2010, ITA issued a request for information, also known as an RFI, and that's really a exploratory, if you will, step before an RFP to evaluate a market and get more information about what types of potential services could be offered and the potential ranges in cost and different issues that would need to be considered. So when ITA issued the RFI in August of 2010, we received 5 responses from vendors: Xerox, HP, Neocomp, the vendor that does the actual repair service on printers today, and a couple other organizations, Printtree, and another organization, RICO, which provides the copy services, multifunction printing for today's equipment that we use in the city. Essentially, some of the results that we found from this RFI was that this was still an evolving market. It was a newer niche that was developing. Managed print services, at that point when we looked at it, had not been implemented in any large cities in the nation. And typical managed print services contracts that have been then put in place are typically for printer fleets of at least 1,000 printers. When we were looking at ITA's printers, just the ones within our own department, there were about 100 printers. And so one of the conclusions that we drew was, one, that we needed to further look at this market while it was evolving because it was still maturing. And 2, if this would be done, it should be really looked at from a citywide basis. So this is really a good point to transition to General Services. They've continued, we've shared with them at the conclusion of our analysis the results, and they have done some further review and analysis themselves And so I'll let the representatives from General Services comment on that.
Do you have a number of how many printers we have in the city of Los Angeles? All departments? Everything from?
I think it's in the neighborhood of 18,000 printers.
18,000.
1,600 copiers, or what we call multifunction devices. And I think of the 18,000 printers, I think there's about 3,500 or so that are considered network printers, which is, you really have three levels of devices. You have desktop devices, you have shared network devices, and then you have larger, potentially shared copier devices.
How many typewriters we have? Maybe one.
Actually, the last we checked, I think Police Department was the only one that still had typewriters.
Really?
Some of the forms require.
Just saving that for the Historical Museum. That was a joke, by the way. But 18,000 printers. We can remember we had the A.B. Dick machines. I don't know if you were around when they had to put the goop in there, the ink, and the ladies would put on the apron, and they would burn those things off, and it was a mess. And Xerox was, wow, what an invention. You put the paper and you come out without getting all dirty. It's amazing how the transition, how we've come from, shall we say, the primitive ages to where we are now. But I was around there when we had those machines and the typewriters, and then we probably spent millions of dollars on whiteout because when you made a mistake, there's no backspace. Right. Just do that old whiteout thing. All right, go ahead. Just reminiscing of the old times in the history. Tom LeBlanc would be here doing that, but I'm doing it in his place. Go ahead.
So in November of last year, 2011, based on some of the information that we gleaned from the path that ITA had taken, we had developed a competitive bid draft document trying to implement the strategy of entering into a managed document services type contractual agreement. Purchasing agent is required to do competitive bids with the analysis based on price. The feedback that we got from this draft document was that, and it was unanimous, that we should not use that type of solicitation to implement this type of strategy, that a price could be certainly a factor, but not the deciding factor. That really, in that type of environment, you want to evaluate a company's success at generating savings from implementing the strategy. And as ITA has said, the strategy is very new in the public sector. And what we're doing now is monitoring what other agencies are doing. The County of Los Angeles is in the process of awarding a contract using this more subjective RFP approach rather than the pricing definitively approach. LAX is also in the process of finalizing a contract, and we would like to see how they implement the strategy and then base our strategy on how others have implemented it. What we've done over this past year, though, is reduce our lease rates for our copiers by 65%. Great. While we've been in this kind of holding pattern monitoring. That equates to about a $2 million savings for this next year. We've also completed a very competitive office products solicitation reverse auction that Toner is a part of, and we've reduced our Toner remanufactured pricing by approximately 50%. So we're not just standing still. We are monitoring what other agencies are doing. We're also trying to lower our costs while we get ready for implementing this next stage. There is definitely room for opportunity. We definitely see that there is a need for having this type of strategy. We need somebody to come in and help us optimize, if you will, the use of the printers, the desktops, the network printers, and then definitely the copiers or multifunction devices. We think that they are being underutilized. The higher volume machines are being underutilized, and it's going to be a difficult implementation to get departments to transition away from the convenience of having the desktops to maybe some inconvenience in going down the hall to get their copies from a copier.
But we'll save money.
Absolutely.
And money is the key that we're talking about.
I was going to say, I just want to kind of step back a bit. This is actually an effort that we've embarked on a couple of years back. One of the first strategies was to work with departments to consolidate print shops. So the various departments had print shops. There were a couple of council motions and reports that went through where we consolidated individual print facilities into our general services, publishing services group. So that resulted in some savings. We know that when you're dealing with printing services in general, the thing that is the least convenient, I guess you could say, is the most cost effective. So when you look at your desktop printer, that's the most convenient but also the most expensive.
Right.
And so in that first effort, again, we were trying to move people away from the convenience of having a stand-up print facility within a department and trying to move that into publishing services. The next big effort was to try to manage all the at the time they were copier machines that were within the departments. We worked with ITA in developing a spec, and we went out to bid, and we're actually a lead agency in a cooperative purchase for multi-function machines. So we have machines that do printing, copying, scanning, and faxing. And by combining all of those pieces of equipment into one, again, we're realizing savings. But that was also a big a push and a new way of doing things, because people are used to, again, having their fax machine nearby and not having to walk to the communal machine for that. We're also trying to encourage folks to, rather than printing at desktop and printing at the copier, to send their jobs over to the publishing services group, because again, we're reducing overall printing costs, we're saving paper by doing that, and there's little steps that we've taken to try to achieve this. So the big overall step will be this ability to be able to go out to RFP, to do an assessment of what our true needs are. There'll be some some consideration for convenience, but at the same time, the ultimate goal is saving the city the most that we can in order to do to print whatever it is that we need. So.
Right. I know there's that convenience. I know with my desk, I have my computer and the printer right next to it, and if I'm in council, I'm not using it. Right now, I'm not using it, so it sits idle most of the time.
Right.
And the time that I use it is very limited, yet it's a printer that sits there, and I think every office probably has that for most. You have one in your office? I think most people have that. So if you look at just the council offices, with 15 council officers, multiple printers, where we could share it easily. But you walk in, it's there. So obviously you use it. So it's a great movement to try and save money at the same time. A little exercise doesn't hurt anyone, to walk up and down the hall and get up your materials. And I remember the gentleman who was in charge of the printing over at, he passed away.
Right. Mike Layton was the head of our printing group. Gerald St. Onge is here, and he is the new head of that group, and we're working closely with him. Fortunately, both work within my organization, so I've got the supply contracting group and the publishing, so we're able to hopefully maximize.
Yeah. No, I remember Mike, I'd visited a few times. They had an open house, and I'd visited a couple of years, and I heard it a couple of years ago he passed away, but I remember they did a great job, showed me the operations and how well things ran. I mean, it was a very efficient, effective printing operation, and sadly he passed away, but they did a great job out there, and it was interesting from my perspective seeing it. We talk about printing, we see the materials, but actually go out there and see the folks at work and how well it was done. I mean, it was an outstanding place. So you've got the LA County, they're doing one, we're looking at what we're doing, so it looks like there's a new horizon to say, how do we reduce the cost, improve the effectiveness, efficiency, and obviously the bottom line is more money for other activities that we need to do. Mr. Rosendahl.
Yeah, no, this is great what you guys are doing. When do you think you'll have that RFI done?
Well, the RFI process has been completed, and in terms of the RFP process,
we hope to have it initiated within the next 6 months. We need to have something in place to replace our RICO copiers by the end of next year. So looking towards the end of next year to start implementation.
You save $2 million and 50% on something else, so you're making progress while we're doing this.
No, I know. So we want to continue and instruct IT and GST to report back pending results of the LAWA RFP and the LA County Award in how long? 45? We'll get an update in 45 days, or is that too short?
How about 3 months? I'm not sure if they will have executed a contract and actually started.
January? Let's do it in January. We want to keep that the way, January 2013. We can keep focus on it so it won't fall off the cliff. Because I think you're looking at, obviously, a major expense, a major cost savings, and more efficiency for everybody. Because all your departments are getting hit. Everybody's getting, we're getting hit, the neighbor councils. And as we see the situation in the future, it doesn't look real bright. Mark?
Councilman, one suggestion that you might want to consider, as we discussed, there's probably immediate steps that can be done to already begin saving money with the steps that we talked about. Reduce the number of personal printers that are in use.
Right.
Move people to be redirecting their printing to shared printers, and for larger volume printers, for larger volume printing, either print on their RICO devices or ship it to publishing services.
Right.
And so without your help, we don't have much influence over departments to get them to move in that direction. So that may be something that you want to consider in the short term while we're still working on developing an RFP or getting an RFP issued.
Do we need a motion on that, or could we just take it from this, and since we're holding this in committee? Huh? All right, we'll do a separate motion on that. It's a great idea. I think people need to look at the idea of doing some more cost savings. And like in my case, I could easily surrender my printer, and other folks in my office could surrender, and we could have maybe one in the north end, one in the south end, or one altogether. It's not inconvenient to walk up and get it. And then you could have like a little mailbox. If I go up there and there's printing from other people, you just put it in a little mailbox, and they come, pick it up when they pick it up. We could cut down. We have a lot of printers that we really don't. If you look at this city, it's tremendous.
You may even want to set, a goal for departments like doing a 20% reduction or some level so that there's something with teeth in it to really get.
We'll do a motion on that. Yeah, it's a great idea. Great idea. It saves everybody a lot of hassle, and it saves money too. Okay, so we'll continue this till January, and we'll move forward on a motion to make that change. Mr. Weissman, Dr. Weissman, you had some comments? Why don't you come up here and get you on the record? Dr. Daniel Weissman.
I wonder if one of you can tell us what your estimate of savings could be in this whole process.
$10 million.
Well, I question that because I've done a little calculating just here in the last few minutes, but these folks have been looking at it.
Well, if you look at the printer, the cost of the printers themselves, the energy to power them, and the paper that we utilize, and you talk about 18,000. I mean, that's a whole lot. Yeah. What does an average printer run?
$200.
No, not the ones we've got.
Yeah, well, the ones I've got is, and you know what I print.
Well,
I've seen my stuff.
But the stuff that we've got's got to be a lot more than $200.
No.
We have done some baseline analysis to try to determine what our actual cost per copy is for the whole segment of devices that we've just talked about. And that's really where we need a consultant to help us track that in a better way. We've done a very, very rough estimate, and we believe our costs are somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.5 cents to 5 cents for black and white, and 7.5 cents or so for color. Now, how much better can we do? We've been told we could save conservatively 20-25% off of that easily.
What's the bottom line? What's the gross figure?
You're talking a lot of money. The bottom line is you're talking a lot of money. That we can save.
No, we're not. That's the point. I'm bringing.
No, that's what we're talking about going forward with.
I think that's what we need to do, of course.
Well, that's what we're going to do.
The universe looks like, it could be as high as $1 million.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, Bill. We're going to conclude at 3:45. Thank you all for being here. And
comment, sir.
Go ahead.
I'm here because the Neighborhood Council Budget Advocates have recently restarted their activities for this year. The Mayor's Community Budget Day, of course, is November 17th, and there'll be a whole lot of new ones in addition to some of the people you've seen already. It's my pleasure to be the chairperson of the Audits Committee. We've gone into several specific committees. Pension is going to have a deep involvement audit, so that we hope to look at some of the audits that have been in the past and some of them that you're working with now, so that those will be well covered. The whole story is going to be, I hope, a lot closer, because what we're trying to do now is to have the neighborhood council budget advocates be very closely related to the representatives too from each council, then to the councils, back from the councils, and back to the neighborhood budget advocates, and of course to you, our decision makers. The whole idea is that this year we're going to be a good deal more proactive, and I hope a good deal more founded in fact. We've amassed a lot of facts. Now we have to be able to bring them to you in usable form.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. That concludes us. Thank you, Bill Rosendahl. Thank you for coming to committee. Thank you all.